This is Forest of Ash, Lesson 11, Magical Gardening. Oh, such a huge and varied subject. I'm not sure where to start. Whether you only have a windowsill with a pot plant on, a small city terrace, a playing field, or several acres, you can always work with the magic of your garden. I think the kitchen extends into the garden anyway, so a kitchen which will often be found pottering around amongst the plants. Being in regular contact with your garden and what you grow, even with your house plants or a few pots of herbs, can help you to connect with the spirit of nature and recognize the subtleties of the changing of the seasons. And your garden can also provide you with food and magical ingredients. Magical gardening does take time, focus, and attention. You can't just plant something and leave it in the hope that several months later it will have grown, flourished, and be covered in fruit or flowers. Okay, on the odd occasion it does happen, but not often. My gardening memories date back to my childhood. My dad is and always was a keen gardener, organic before it was fashionable to be so. He has always had an allotment and a greenhouse, which provided a bounty of wonderful fruit and vegetables. Apparently, even as a toddler, I would disappear down the garden with him and come back covered in mud. In my early teens, I experienced food production on a large scale as I lived on a farm for a few years. Then, in my late teens, I had the opportunity of working for a specialist glasshouse company. Both of these life events added to my love of the garden, food, and nature's bounty. Once I owned my own house, the garden became key. It is my sanctuary, a peaceful place to escape to, and a space in which to create magic. For the past 30 or so of years, we have lived in the same house. It is on the edge of a large city and only has a small walled garden. But it is ours, and we have packed it full of as many plants, flowers, and herbs as we can cram into it. Even on my busy days, I try to step out into the garden, if only just for a few minutes to relax and to connect with Mother Earth. Your garden, whatever size it is, opens up a whole new world of magic for you to delve into. Warning: gardening is addictive and will improve your health, spirit, and your mental well being. Not only is the garden your direct line to a natural source of energy, it can also provide you with a whole shopping trolley full of free, magical, and often edible ingredients, whether it is the form of fruit and vegetables or flowers, petals, and seeds. Let's open the magical box. You may imagine you need to have a beautiful picture box garden laid out in front of a thatched cottage to have a witch's garden, but really that isn't the case. You can style the garden in any way that suits your taste, the size of garden, and your budget. Many hours and much money can be spent in garden centres, and whilst they are brilliant sources for plant and design inspiration, you can spend more money than you need to. Oh, and a lot of them have a cafe with cake. Plant nurseries often tend to be cheaper than garden centres, but ask around. Lots of family and friends will probably be willing to share cuttings and seeds with you. And once your garden has a few plants in, you can propagate more from those you already have. Gardening does take time and effort. You will need to dig, plant, weed, deadhead, water, and keep things generally tidy. Even a small garden can eat up the time, but it will be worth the effort. Just bear the time factor in mind when designing your garden and choosing your plants. Watching something grow and flourish under your care is incredibly rewarding. Add to that, once you establish plants in your garden, the wildlife will follow. Our garden this past summer had so many bees flitting about that it was deafening. In fact, I think we got in their way. They seemed incredibly annoyed if we were trying to tend to a plant that they were interested in. Along with all the butterflies, birds, and of course the wide variety of insects, you may even find other creatures such as toads and hedgehogs begin to visit. Gardens have gone through many changes over the years and come in many shapes, sizes, and varieties. Immaculate green lawns with flower borders, back gardens turned over to vegetable plots during the war, concreted over with large patios or decking, and all other designs in between. The plants within, though, have long been used for medicinal and magical purposes. I think it is worth doing some historical research on garden design before you plan yours out. History can provide inspiration and insight. Garden magic covers not only plants, trees, and flowers, but also using pebbles, shells, stones, and any other manner of natural items to work magic with, including those incredibly annoying spider webs that have a habit of colliding with your face when you walk outside. Spider webs are very useful ingredients in witch bottles, by the way. I will talk about the magical properties of flowers, seeds, plants, and trees. More detailed information can be found in Rachel's books, A Kitchen Witch's World of Magical Plants and Herbs, and A Kitchen Witch's World of Magical Food. But I also love to work with colour magic, so I will share my thoughts on that too. Don't think you have to limit your garden to just herbs or fill it with ancient or deadly plants. Each and every type of plant contains magic of some kind, even the humble blade of grass and the wayward weed. A weed is just a plant growing in the wrong place. In the beginning, you may already have a garden in place, or at least the basics, or you may be starting from scratch. Your first plan of action is to assess it. What type of soil do you have? This will affect the sort of plants you can grow in the ground. What direction does it face? And do you have shady or sunny spots? Plants have requirements. Not everything likes full sun, and not everything will survive under the shade of a tree or in a windy spot. Take a look around and work out what spaces you have and what conditions they provide for your plants. What temperature zone do you live in? Some plants won't like the cold, and some won't survive if a frost hits. What is your average rainfall? Not all plants like soggy feet. If you get stuck, your local nursery or garden centre will be able to advise you. What access do you need to your garden? Don't block the gates or pathways with flower beds. What views do you have? Don't block out pretty landscapes, borrow them. If your neighbour has tall trees or hedges, use these as a frame or backdrop for your garden. However, if your garden backs onto a commercial warehouse or an ugly building, you might want to think about plants that will grow upwards to hide it. Think about how much time you have to tend in your garden. If your time is limited, you may not want to fill it with annuals or vegetables that need a lot of attention. Perennials and shrubs would be better for you. Don't forget to check the height and spread that a plant is supposed to grow to, and always trust the information. We planted a Photinia shrub many years ago. The details said it would only grow to a maximum of 6 feet. We didn't prune it much, and eventually it reached the height of about 25 feet. Think about whether you want space to sit in the garden, room for chairs, and even a small table. Be careful when digging, you don't want to hit gas or water pipes with your shovel. If you have the space, you may also want to work in room for a small ritual circle or a fire pit. Even a small garden may have a little room for an outdoor altar or a shrine. Plan it all out on paper first. Cut out clippings from magazines of plants or designs that you like and research for ideas on the internet or in the library. Visit local open gardens. Even large, stately home gardens can be an inspiration for the smaller garden. Compost. If you have the room for a compost bin, it is worthwhile. We have one the size of a trash can, stroke dustbin, and all the vegetable peelings, eggshells, and old newspapers get chucked in. There is a whole complicated science around compost, and ideally in a large garden, you would have 2 or 3 compost heaps that you rotate, turn, and move regularly. In reality, most of us only have room for a single small one, but it still works effectively. It just takes a bit longer. Flow of magic in a garden space. When I was talking about gardens, someone suggested I write about the flow of magic in a garden space. So I will. Have you been in some gardens that immediately feel magical, or a garden that makes you feel relaxed and peaceful as soon as you step through the gate? That is when the flow of magic has been created perfectly. Occasionally it happens by accident, but usually it is the result of lots of careful planning and hard work. The style of your garden will reflect you and your personality and will probably evolve and change over time. Getting the balance in a garden can be tricky and often involves moving things around until it feels right. Think about the atmosphere you want in your garden. If you would like it to be peaceful, then you may want to keep to a colour palette of cool blues, whites, and pinks. A big old orange flower bed in your face doesn't perhaps convey calm and serenity, but bright flowers might suit you better. Trust your intuition and what works for you. Design will also be a key factor. Even in my own small garden, we still try to create some secret areas and paths that invite you to walk down them. I like a garden to draw you in, so that you have to investigate to find things, but go with what works for you. You will know whether you have the flow of magic right or not, and if you don't, keep tweaking until you do. A garden altar. Having an outdoor altar is a lovely idea and gives you a magical focal point in the garden. You can use it to leave offerings for the fae or to deity, but also as a focal point to sit outside and meditate in front of. It can be as simple as a flat stone or a piece of wood, or something grander involving wood, stones, shells, and even mirrors and statues. Make sure whatever you place on your altar with the intent of leaving it out is biodegradable and won't harm wildlife if they decide to take a nibble, or your pets. I like to leave natural spells on my garden altar whilst the magic works. Be creative and use what you have. A few bricks laid together or some old floor tiles would work really well. If you are feeling creative, you can make a mosaic platform using broken tiles or crockery. If you are short of space, a shelf on the garden or house wall would also work. What you put on it is up to you. As always, be guided by your intuition. Representations of your gods, the elements, and animal spirit guides, perhaps. I found a round paving slab cheaply in a garden centre last year. It has the compass point set into it, and it works perfectly as a garden altar. Spells can be left on the garden altar that work with the elements of nature. Leaves with wishes written on can be left out for the sun to dry. Write spells in chalk on slate or stones and leave them out for the rain to wash them. Paper petitions can be set out to be worked on by the weather too. Draw symbols and sigils in the soil. And of course, spells can be buried in your garden too. Statues and plaques add another dimension to the garden. I also have a couple of big mirrors against the wall, which reflect back images of the plants, but also make the garden look bigger. You will often find green men and green ladies plaques in garden centres. We even found a stone wizard statue recently. Steve, the wizard, now presides over one of the flower beds. Wind chimes are a beautiful addition to gardens and can even be hung on balconies and in windows. The sound they make range from light tinkly noises from the small metal ones to a deep hollow sound from the bamboo type. Strings of beads and coloured glass can be hung from branches to create interest and reflections. Solar fairy lights are an excellent electricity battery-free option and can be strung across balconies or in the branches of trees and bushes. From garden to home. The easiest way to bring some magic into the house or the home of a friend from nature's garden is with fresh flowers or a pot plant. Not only will it look beautiful and be a connection for you to the spirit of nature, but each flower and plant has magical properties of its own that it can bring to your home. Let's have a look at the properties of some of the more unusual house plants. African violet, spirituality and protection. Spider plant, absorbs negative energies. Fern, protection. Ivy, fidelity and fertility. Aloe, not only good to have a hand in the kitchen for burns, it is also a plant of luck and wards against accidents. Ficus, love, luck, guards against hunger. Cyclamen, fertility, happiness and lust, and it's a good one for the bedroom. Pansy, to ease matters of the heart. Folk name, heartsease. Carnations, health and healing. Marigolds, psychic abilities. And roses, lust, love and romance. With roses especially, you can also add colour magic to the properties. So white roses would bring peace, yellow would bring happiness, and orange would bring energy, etc. So on to plants and the garden itself. Trees are obviously incredibly magical, but you'll have to wait for the next lesson to find all about those. There are many, many shrubs and ground cover plants, and all of them have magical properties, such as hydrangeas, which are good for hex breaking, or lilacs and viburnum, both of which are good for protection. The periwinkle is a pretty ground cover plant that not only attracts the fae, but is also excellent in spells for bindings, protection, love, and prosperity. But don't take my word for magical properties each of the plants in your garden has. Use your own intuition and spidey senses to see what properties you think your plants have. And flowers. Not only beautiful to look at and a source of nectar for the bees, flowers are incredibly special when it comes to magic. I think there are probably flowers of every single shade and colour, and again here you can use your colour magic to work with them. Blue flowers can be used to represent the element of water. Purple ones would be good for psychic abilities and power. Pink flowers for love and friendship, etc. Of course, each specific type of flower has its own magical meaning too. Flowers also have a language of their own, dating back to Victorian times, when the flowers that was given to you by a friend or intended had its very own message. Forget-me-not would mean true love. Daisy would mean innocence. And thistle would mean I will never forget these. Although I'm not sure about some of the messages personally, such as sage meant domestic virtues and daffodil meant delusive hope. There are also flowers associated with each month, which can be used in your magical workings. Whether you use the correspondence to tie in with the date you are working the spell or the month of birth for the person you are working the spell for, it will add power to it. This is a very basic guide to give you the idea, but again, go with what feels right for you. January. crocus, snowdrop, February, primrose, March, daffodil, April, daisy and sweet pea, May, broom or rose, June, lavender, yarrow, July, jasmine, August, sunflower and marigold, September, lily, October, dahlia, November, chrysanthemum, and December, poinsettia. Herbs. We covered a lot about herbs in previous lessons, herbalism and kitchen magic, but I wanted to mention them here as they are, I think, a hugely important part of magical gardens. Even if you don't have a garden at all, you usually have a windowsill that can house a pot of herbs. There are many types of herbs, some hardy, some not. You will need to check which ones can grow outside and which ones suit your soil and area. I can't grow basil very well outside. It doesn't like our climate very much. And I can't seem to grow parsley at all. But that is probably down to the folk tale that if a woman is in charge of the household, parsley won't grow in the garden. Deity. Lots of flowers and plants have associations with specific deities. If you work with a particular god or goddess, you could put a plant in your garden that they would appreciate. For instance, cyclamen, willow, and monkshood are associated with Hecate, roses and heather with Isis, violets and roses with Aphrodite. Flower fascinations. Fascination means to bewitch and hold spellbound. They are flower spells and charms. If you put together the knowledge you have on magical properties within flowers, herbs, and plants, it is easy to put together a flower fascination. It doesn't need to be fancy. Just putting together corresponding flowers and herbs with the same intent into a vase will do the trick. Put the vase somewhere that you will see it and visualize your intent each time you do. Flower seeds can be added to medicine bags and charm bags, then worn or kept with you. Decorate a small besom or wreath with dried or fresh flowers with a particular intent in mind, or to celebrate a Sabbath or honour a specific deity. Keeping a dried poppy head in your purse for prosperity, tying a bunch of sage over the front door for protection, putting herbs in a sachet to keep in the car for safety and protection, all of these are simple flower fascinations. Types of garden. You can also plant up your garden with a theme. You could dedicate the whole garden or a section of it to a particular deity and fill it with plants that honour and correspond to them. You could make your garden or an area of it into a garden for the fae. The ideas are limitless, really. I have seen herbs planted in a spiral to honour the goddess, herbs and bedding plants laid out in the shape of a pentacle, a garden laid out in 4 sections to honour the 4 elements, each section having been planted with corresponding flowers and shrubs. What about planting a planetary garden? You could choose plants that correspond to each of the planets. So for Sun, you might plant sunflowers, marigolds, and rosemary. For the Moon, you might plant jasmine, pumpkins, or gardenia. Mercury might be fennel, lavender, and dill. Mars could be snapdragons, radish, and holly. Jupiter, you might plant a meadowsweet, sage, and honeysuckle. And Venus, you could plant violets, foxgloves, and primroses. And Saturn could be ivy, pansies, and mimosa. We touched on fairy gardens in a previous lesson, but they are very popular gardens to create and can be very rewarding. You can create separate sections of the garden to attract different types of fae, for instance, a shady, earthy area for the gnomes and brownies. Generally, the fae like water, shiny things, and pretty scented flowers. You could also place a few crystals amongst the plants for them too. Protection plants. As most gardens are within the boundaries of your home, protection is quite a fixture in the magical plant world. In the summer months, I have a large trough at the front of my home filled with red geraniums as a protective ward. Ivy is also good for protection, as are marigolds. These can be planted along the edge of your boundary or put in pots. Planting with the moon. A lot of gardeners, even those who aren't witches, plant and harvest by the phases of the moon. You can still find old almanacs that list what to plant and when to align with astrological timings. Think how much the moon affects the sea and her tides, so it must affect the earth and how things grow too. A waxing moon is good for planting. Fruit for eating straight away should be picked on a waxing moon. A waning moon is good for planting plants that fruit below ground, such as potatoes, and a waning moon is good for pruning, weeding, and harvesting food to be stored. Just after a new moon, plant leafy vegetables and herb seeds. Waxing moon, pot cuttings, repot house plants, pick herbs, fruit and veg for eating straight away. Full moon, plant vegetables such as tomatoes, peppers and onions, any type of watery fruit and veg. Fertilise your plants on a full moon too. Just after the full moon, plant tuber vegetables such as carrots and potatoes, also biennials and perennials. Waning moon, start a compost heap, weed, cut and prune, pick fruits and flowers, herbs and vegetables that will be stored. Close to the dark moon, cut timber and spray any fruit trees with eco-friendly spray. Element signs. Tying in the horoscope correspondences work well for magical gardening too. Earth signs, Taurus, Virgo and Capricorn. When the moon phases past these signs, it deals with all your roots. So sow radishes, potatoes, carrots, etc. Make the most of the earthy energy. Water signs, Cancer, Scorpio and Pisces. When the moon passes through these signs, work with your leafy plants like lettuce and cabbage. Air signs, Gemini, Libra and Aquarius. When the moon passes through these signs, work with your flowers. Plant or flowering vegetables such as broccoli and cauliflower, and flowering plants in general. Fire signs, Aries, Leo and Sagittarius. When the moon passes through these signs, work with your fruit seeds such as tomatoes, peas and beans, plants that bear fruit after the flower has dried. Gratitude. When we work spells, I think there has to be a thank you involved. If the magic works and the gods have granted our request, I do believe it is only polite to say thanks. Working, tending and looking after your garden is an excellent way to do that. You are giving your time, effort and energy to look after nature, whether that is the plants, the soil, the insects or birds and animals in your garden. If your garden is giving you beautiful plants, flowers and trees, and providing you with magical, medicinal and culinary ingredients, it is only fair that you give something back. You could perform regular gratitude rituals or make offerings at your garden altar. But think along practical lines as well. Feed and nourish the soil regularly with liquid feed or mulches and compost. Add crystals and other natural offerings of thanks. Sow seeds to replace plants you have harvested. Recycle and use whatever you take from your garden, especially if you have a glut of produce or seedlings. Share them with your friends and neighbours, and don't forget to say thank you to the plant and the earth when you harvest anything. Working with the elements. When you're in the garden or even just working with your pot plants, you're effectively connecting with all of the elements. The soil obviously is the element of earth. Your plant will need water and air to survive, and fire is the sunlight that it requires to grow. But as we started this lesson with the advice that gardening takes time and effort, that is how we should finish it. The final element in creating and tending a magical garden is you. You are the element that brings it all together. It is your work and attention that make it all happen. Homework. 1. If you could design your own garden from scratch, what theme would you go with and what would you put in it? 2. This lesson requires you to work through the Flower Magic branch class. Please send an email to request the first lesson. Homework for each lesson should be emailed to your mentor, Ness or Heather, support@kitchenwitchhearth.net. For further study, Rachel's YouTube Garden Magic playlist, or Rachel's blog Plants and Herbs tab.